when you're saying my clients are throwing urine or feces on you, what? So it's really difficult. But as I developed relationships with our clients, as I developed relationships with the people who were working in the facility and really understanding why they were there, what they were doing to try and keep everyone safe, what they were doing for their families and their community, it became quite clear that my thinking was flawed. And that process of sort of recognizing my own fault and doing that self-reflection was incredibly difficult. And it's quite honestly very embarrassing still to talk about and to admit, especially to this group. Justin, don't hold it against me. So I just want to encourage all of us to do some of that work, to think broadly, to challenge ourselves, to challenge each other, to really see where our blind spots are. We have been having these conversations for a really long time. What are we not seeing? Or are there solutions already on the table that we can refine further and really push forward? So as I said, we're very lucky to have Vera, representatives from Vera here. They've been working with us since 2014 on some of our criminal justice reform initiatives, and they are now expanding their role to help inform us and navigate us through the next step in terms of our jail discussions. They'll speak more about their experience, but they're really uniquely positioned because they have a national perspective about reforms across the country, what's working, what's not working, but they also have local experience, relationships, and expertise here. So I'll turn it over to Liz Fabola from Vera to take us away.
Yeah, actually, if we could start by hearing from all of you, if we could go around and hear your name and what organization or agency you're here representing, that would be great, so we know who we're talking to. So let's start with you, Curtis.
Hey, good morning. Kurt Robinson, Spokane NAACP and the State Area Conference for the NAACP Lost Board in Washington.
Curtis Hampton, Spokane Against Racism and Concerned Community member.
Good morning, I'm Teresa Sanders. I'm the City Administrator for the City of Spokane.
Kelly Fitzgerald, Spokane County Prosecutor's Office.
I'm Erin Williams-Heater. I'm the Director at Lutheran Community Services Northwest. We have the Spokane Crime Victim Service Center and Sexual Assault Center.
I'm Mike Sparber, the Assistant Director for Detention Services with the bad guys.
Ben Stuckert, City of Spokane.
Mary Cuny, Spokane County Commissioner.
Al French, County Commissioner, and also the current chair of the SRLJC.
Kathleen Turtle, Director of Community Services, Housing, Training, and Development for Spokane County, includes the Behavioral Health Administrative Service Organization.
And I'm Kelly Keenan. I'm the Director of Community Housing and Human Services at the City of Spokane.
Good morning, Mark Richard, Downtown Spokane Partnership.
Matt Hargett, Spokane County Public Defenders.
Kathy Knox, Spokane City Public Defender.
Jan Sigler, Pioneer Human Services.
Dave Ellis, Undersheriff, Spokane County Sheriff's Office.
Justin London, Assistant Chief, Spokane Police Department.
Kerry Driscoll, City Attorney, Spokane Valley.
Mike Ormsby, City of Spokane, legal.
Kathy Haley, City of Spokane Valley, Deputy Mayor.
Charles Clark, Spokane County Superior Court.
Good morning, I'm Jerry Gemmel, I'm Spokane County CEO.
Tracy Staub, Spokane Municipal Court.
I'm Jeff Smith, Spokane County District Court.
Hi, I'm Tanya Stern. I'm Assistant Director for Spokane County Community Services, Housing and Community Development.
I'm John Dixon, Spokane County Chief Operations Officer.
Amber Linhart, Spokane Regional Health District Data Center.
John Alders, Peace Justice Action League.
Diane Lindquist, Spokane County Data Analyst.
Karen Westberg with the Law and Justice Administrator's Office.
Downs Paul, Spokane County Budget Office.
Kathy McEnroe, I'm the Director of Social Work for Providence Healthcare.
Nick Straley with Columbia Legal Services.
Cam Zorozua from Center for Justice.
I'm Angel Tomio Sam, and I'm with the Bail Project.
Doug Gamborley, Public Radio.
Jim Wilson, Community Member.
Great. Did we miss anyone? No? Yes.
I'm Sabrina Ryan from the Bail Project as well.
Great. Okay. So, as Maggie said, we are here from the Vera Institute of Justice. My name is Liz Fabola. I'm going to have each of my colleagues introduce themselves before they do their respective parts of the presentation and tell you a bit more about each of them individually. I'll tell you about myself. So I've been at the Vera Institute of Justice for about 4.5 years. I work with counties and cities that are trying to reduce the number of people in their jails. I work here in Spokane, also in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I also work with Pennington County, South Dakota. which is looking specifically at the growing number of women in our jail and trying to figure out how to prevent so many women from coming in. I've also worked in Tennessee and some other counties here in Washington. Before coming to Vera, I worked at a different nonprofit called the Joyful Heart Foundation, where I was working with and on behalf of survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. And I can tell you, I bring that perspective with me to this work. Every week I would get calls from survivors of violence saying they felt like the criminal justice system was failing them. So I just want you to know that I bring that perspective to this work as well. I also come from a family of law enforcement, so have that experience of being a daughter and a sister of members of law enforcement. So lots of different perspectives, as I know we each bring to this work. Okay, so agenda. We have a very packed agenda. So I'm going to be really militant with our time today and keep us moving and keep us on track. So if I interrupt you and tell you we need to move on, I'm not being a rude New Yorker. I'm just being conscious of how much time we have. So we are already obviously started with our introductions and ground rules, which will come next. We are going to talk about the process over the next couple of months. We are also going to start thinking about the vision for this group, think about where we're going and how we can get there when it comes to criminal justice in Spokane as well as corrections. And then we're going to do some Jails 101. This is kind of an overview of how jails work across the country, some national trends, and then we'll drill down a bit into how the trends are playing out here in Spokane. And from that, we want to hear data and policy questions that you have and what might be helpful to inform you as you move forward in this process. Time willing, we will also do some challenge statements, so thinking about where we want to go and where we are now and what are the gaps between those two different places. And then we'll wrap up and do next steps. And at the very end, we will have time for public comment. We have about 20 minutes, and we know that's not a lot of time. We asked members of the community to save their questions until that time. We gave you note cards so you can take notes. If questions come up, write them down, save them for the public comment time. And if you aren't comfortable asking it in front of the group, please feel free to pass it to one of us at Vera. Okay.
I just have one question.
Yep.
So is this being live streamed or recorded?
I'm
Just
gonna ask
recorded.
Maggie.
Okay, and then it'll be made available to the public?
Yeah, we'll figure out the best way to get that on our website, but yeah, we'll share that as best we can, and the slides will be available, as Liz said. Before we dive into things, just a reminder, restrooms are out in the hall. Snacks, water, coffee over here. Help yourselves, take breaks when you need them. We do have one break built in, and I just want to also recognize everyone who made this space possible. So they're not in here, but there's a whole crew of people this morning pulling tables and chairs in. So thanks to them, and then thanks to Karen for helping us with the technical side of things, as well as keeping us fed and caffeinated.
Yes, thank you. I second that. Okay, so what is the Vera Institute of Justice? We are an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We work with cities and counties across the country and as well as states and at the federal level to study and analyze problems in justice systems. We produce and utilize evidence to drive effective policies and practices. We like data a lot, and we're definitely going to bring that into this process. We pilot solutions and we engage diverse communities. So Vera has different centers which focus on different bodies of work. Myself, Alex, and Chris, who you'll meet soon, are in the Center on Sentencing and Corrections, where we partner with state and local systems to advance justice policies that promote fairness and protect public safety. And we do this through 3 bodies of work. The first is to improve outcomes for justice-involved people by advancing access to high-quality college education behind bars and reducing the use of solitary confinement. And then our third body of work is closing incarceration's front door by reducing the overuse of jails, which is what brought us to Spokane in the first place 4 years ago through the Safety and Justice Challenge. And I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin quickly to tell you about the center where she works.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So I'm Caitlin Call, and I have worked with Liz and Alex and Chris for years now I actually used to be in the same department at FIRA. So my background is in criminal justice reform, but I moved over to a different center a few years ago to work on issues related to victimization and safety. So this center really focuses on making sure that victims who have the least access to services, maybe because of their identity or where they're located, but have higher rates of victimization, have access to these services. So the past decade, the center has really focused on people with disabilities who have been victims of domestic and sexual violence and making sure that services are accessible and welcoming to them. A few years ago, we really brought in to make sure that all survivors, especially those with marginalized backgrounds, have the help that they need. So I joined that body of work. So like Liz, I bring a couple different perspectives to this. Thank you, Caitlin.
Okay, so, and I'm going to apologize up front. I know some of you were at the town hall, the community town hall last night, so some of this is going to be a bit of a repeat. We really felt that in terms of equity, it was important that everyone, community, folks here, were getting all of the same information, so some of this may sound repetitive. And try not to, share any spoilers because it's gonna be really exciting as it unfolds. So, let everyone have their own journey. Okay, so my first ground rule to ask of all of you is to approach these meetings with creativity and collaboration to solve problems. That's basically asking you to come to this with an open mind. We are very aware that you have been engaged in these conversations for well over 10 years. You're frustrated, you want to move on, you want to see action, and we get that. We totally understand that. We, experience that in all of the places where we work. But I think Spokane is in a new place. I think there's a lot happening in the criminal justice system, even just in the few short years that we've been working here, that bring a different perspective to the work that you'll be doing. And so we ask you to be open, to learn from each other. It's not a foregone conclusion that there will be jail construction. Maybe there will, maybe there won't. Maybe it'll be bigger, maybe it'll be smaller. We don't know yet. That's what this process is for. And so we ask you to be open and to learn from others and to hear about their solutions that they're proposing. We ask you to engage in thoughtful, honest, and respectful dialogue. Debate is part of problem solving. And if you're, talking a lot and you feel like, maybe it's time for someone else to speak, cede the floor. If you are speaking on behalf of someone who is not here or a group of people, and maybe there's someone here who's better positioned to talk on behalf of that group, encourage them to speak up as well. Everyone shares ownership and responsibility in this process. We didn't get to where we are today because of one agency or one person. Caitlin's going to share with you about all of the different decision points that make up the criminal justice system. We all have a part in this, and we all have a say in what the system looks like going forward. Assume best intentions of all who are present. Don't assume that you know where someone is coming from. Like we said, Caitlin and I both shared, we have nuanced perspectives. We all bring our personal and our professional experiences with the criminal justice system, with crime. So be open that people have nuanced perspectives and bring expertise of experience as well. Finally, moving on, recognize this process will require self-reflection, partnership, and compromise. There are a lot of different options, but not every single person is going to see the outcome exactly as they envision it in their mind. It's going to take consensus, it's going to take visions from multiple people, and that's okay. And so question yourself. If you're really holding on to one specific idea or solution, ask yourself why, and probe and challenge, and think about, are there other options that could work just as well, if not better? Ask questions of us, but also each other. If you're curious about how something works in district court, ask the judge, or municipal court, ask the judge, superior court, law enforcement. Really encourage each other. I don't know how that works. Could you share with me? So we're all going to learn from each other. And give all members an opportunity to weigh in. Again, if you feel like you're talking too much, cede the floor to others. Like we said, community will have an opportunity to weigh in at the end. and hold each other accountable to these rules. If you feel like someone's not following them and maybe we need to go back and look at them, we can do that. We'll try to hold you accountable, but we encourage you to do that for each other as well. Anything else anyone wants to add as a ground rule? Okay. And can we all raise our hand if we agree with these ground rules and to abide by these ground rules? I don't see anyone not raising their hand. Okay, excellent, thank you. Okay, so really quickly, going through our process. So we see this as a three-phase process over the next 6 months. And we're breaking it down into those 3 different phases. So the first phase has begun. We are doing qualitative and quantitative data gathering. So Spokane has been participating in the Safety and Justice Challenge, as I mentioned earlier, where they've already provided a ton of data from the jail, but also the courts and multiple different criminal justice agencies. And so all of that data is accessible to us. We'll be able to help analyze it, to help look at trends, charges that are bringing people into the system, how long they're staying, racial and ethnic disparities, gender disparities. We'll be able to dig into all of this to see how the jail is currently being used. We will also be joined in this process by another organization called JFA. They are experts in jail forecasting. So they look at how the jail has been used historically, as well as things like population, crime rates, arrest rates, to help you project out how your jail population might grow over time. And they'll look at, if you do nothing at all, here's what might happen. If you continue with your reforms that you've already implemented, if you add other reforms, here's what the population might look like over time. And so the next phase, once we've gathered all of this data, we will share it with all of you. We will do presentations. We will get your take and your perspective. We will follow up on questions that you have. This will be a really collaborative process that we will all do some analysis together. And then we'll come up with recommendations. You all are here because you've been tasked with offering recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners about the future of the justice system in Spokane. And so we don't really like to work by coming in and telling you what you should do. You're the experts in your own system. We want to hear from you, and we want this to be informed but by what you all have identified as the needs and for the future going forward. Maggie, do you want to talk about proxies and voting?
Yeah, so we don't anticipate that there will be votes, but if we need to take one, if it's okay with everyone in this room, we'll just go by majority. But if anyone has any concerns with that, you can raise them now, or if we get to a point where we need to take a vote. The other issue is proxies. Some of you, I know, are here on behalf of others, and we really appreciate you coming on behalf of whoever was invited to serve on the task force. If in the future others are unable to attend a meeting, please send a proxy. Again, we'll be recording, we'll be making slides available, but these sessions are going to each build on the last one, so it's really important to have as much continuity as we can so that we're continuing that forward momentum.
One thing I should have mentioned in terms of qualitative research, we spent yesterday out at Geiger as well as the downtown jail talking with staff to hear about their perspectives on future visits. We also hope to meet with people who are incarcerated in the jails to get their perspectives on how things could be better. We are also doing community town halls, as some of you already know, because you were there last night, to hear from as many different parts of the community as possible. We feel it's really important for them to help inform you all in your work.
And one additional activity that we're organizing with support and assistance from Acting Director Sparber is setting up a tour of the jail facilities for the members of this task force. So if you haven't been in the jail ever, if you haven't been in recently, we will be in contact with you to get that set up, and thank you, Sparber, for making that possible.
Yes?
Just one question. So you just said that you might be meeting with inmates.
Yeah.
So is that, as I heard it expressed, might be, or are you planning on doing so and just trying to figure out the logistics of it?
Yeah, so that is something we feel strongly committed to, that we want to do. We feel that they have the expertise of experience, and so we want to hear from them. We, as a research institution, have to go through a very rigorous process with our institutional review board. because people who are incarcerated are quote, a vulnerable population, and it can be risky for them to participate in research. So we're just working out that approval process. I don't foresee that they will say no, because they very much encourage that type of research. But I just don't know if that will happen on the next visit or the following visit, but we are committed to making that happen.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I just want to speak on that real quick, because I know that that's one of the models that we've seen with businesses successfully is feedback, right, from the people that you're serving.
Exactly.
That you're interacting with. So.
Exactly. Yep. They have expertise that none of us may have.
Would it be easier to use impacted people who are already out but have been in? Would that be a different thing in terms of your institute? Or
Yeah, I think that's also something we can explore. I do really think we will be able to go into the jail and do the research. If not, that is a backup plan. I think we have representation here from formerly incarcerated people. We're hearing from people in the town halls as well. So that is another perspective that we're gaining. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move into some activity. Again, don't spoil this if you were there last night. So, by show of hands, how many people think the Spokane criminal justice system, as it is today, is working perfectly? No one. And no one raised their hand last night either, surprise. So that means we all agree that there's room for change. We may disagree in how we think change should happen or what that change should be, but we're all gonna work together towards a shared vision. And so this activity is to help us start thinking about where we want to go, what the criminal justice system would look like if it were working perfectly. And so groups that do this activity are often surprised that they actually share a lot of the same visions. Again, they may disagree about how to get there, but we all want a healthy community, we all want safety, we all want accountability. So we're gonna figure out together how we get there. So I want you to take a few minutes, you each should have a note card. Write down 2 to 3 core values or principles central for you and your work. And then 2 to 3 values or principles under which this collaborative will operate. You've all worked together, maybe not this whole group together at once, but you know how things work here in Spokane, and you know that the values that you as community members bring to the work, the collaborative work. And then third, if Spokane's criminal justice system were working ideally, what would it look like? How would you know? What would the community look like? Okay, so we'll give you a few minutes to think about that, write some answers down.
Yeah, it's better because.
Sorry about that. Can people
Well,
see?
it's just, all of us are leaning back this way, trying to see, we're all leaning
That's
this way.
not helpful.
Thank you.
It's a long morning.
Appreciate it.
And if you can't see and you need me to repeat, just let me know. About 3 minutes. When you're thinking about the third one, don't think about how the system currently is. Think about your vision for the future, how it would be working.
I might be the only one. Can you help me distinguish between 1 and 2?
Yes. So number 1 is kind of your own personal, you as an individual.
Okay.
And number 2 is the collaborative, this group. So when you've been in collaborative groups before here in Spokane, what are values that you've noticed in working together as a group? Good question, thank you. Okay, about 1 more minute. No, it's not a lot of time. We're just going to you're just going to call out, raise your hand, share with us as a group, and then if you wrote down what someone else is saying, just give us a peace sign, a second, so that we know that we're also thinking that same or something very similar. Thank you. Okay, so who wants to share we'll start with one, core value or principle that's central for you and your work? Yes.
Fairness and equality for participants.
Okay. Did anyone else say something similar? Okay.
About equity.
Equity. Okay.
Transparency.
Transparency. Okay. So a few seconds. Yes.
Accountability.
Accountability. Great. Thank you. Anyone else?
Justice.
Justice. Good one. We have a few seconds. Yes.
Restorative justice.
Restorative justice. A few seconds. Yes.
Integrity.
Integrity. Good one. Yes. Or were you seconding?
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm so excited I'm jumping ahead. Al?
Safe environment for both inmates and corrections officers.
Okay.
Humanity.
Yes.
Support for victims.
I'm going to give Chris a second to catch up.
Oh, sorry. I was seconding what he said and adding community safety.
Yes.
Specifically racial justice?
Racial justice. Any second for that? Yep. Anyone else? Do one more. Yes.
Supporting long and healthy lives.
Great.
I want to add accountability, restorative accountability.
Okay. Restorative accountability.
And can I add one totally outside the box, fiscal responsibility?
Do you have any seconds on that one?
Oh, yeah.
Fiscal responsibility.
Community investment.
Okay, so moving to the second one, 2 to 3 core values or principles which the collaborative will operate under. Go first. Yes.
Collaboration.
Collaboration. We have some seconds? Yeah? Okay. Yes.
Dedication to systemic change.
I'll second that with outcome driven.
Outcome driven. Others?
Beneficial to the community at large.
Yes.
Work for solutions, not positions.
I like that. Can you say a little bit more about what that means?
Well, we all want to fix the system, but we all come with our own specific biases, and so how do we set those aside and say we're going to fight for a better system, not necessarily my solution?
Very good.
To dovetail on that, I put just a simple one, willingness.
Shared vision.
Shared vision. That means you support this exercise, so I like that one. Yes.
Action.
Action. Yes.
Passion for the work. I think we all have that. That's why we're here.
Yep. Others? One more maybe before we move on?
Open-mindedness.
Equity and decision making.
Okay, so moving on to the third one. If Spokane's criminal justice system were working ideally, what would it look like? How would you know? What outcomes? Yes?
Evidence-based practices.
Okay, great. Yep.
Focus on treatment rather than incarceration.
along with that, more rehab services and less trauma for long and healthy lives.
More rehab, less trauma. Long and healthy lives, what's that? So here, we'll kind of work our way around. Yeah.
The outcomes would mirror the community's values.
Yes.
Lower incarceration rates and reduced crime.
Okay.
And to kind of dovetail on that, this is kind of a preemptive thing, but processes and programs which prevent entrance into our criminal justice system to begin with. Things like economic opportunities, housing, treatment, those sorts of things.
Okay, so we can call that maybe prevention.
Yeah, and I was just gonna trail into that because I was looking at the therapeutic, mutagenic-based sentencing.
Therapeutic need-based sentencing.
It might not be the exact same thing, but diversion. So prevention is good, but also diversion if they're not in the system.
Okay, yes.
Swift and certain justice.
Okay. Coming around, Barbara?
I would say conditions of confinement, mandatory conditions of confinement.
Yes.
Victims feel safe and supported.
Great. Tracy?
Supporting now fewer victims of crime.
Fewer victims of crime.
Pretrial oversight.
Okay. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Basically, more visibility on the pretrial process and what happens from the time the person is brought into the system and what happens along the way until they are actually goes to court. I think if you look at most of the people in pretrial, there are several situations in which concurrences occur, and without visibility, those could be happening more randomly than necessary. As a result, you have more people awaiting trial, so as a result of that, you have a need for additional beds in a prison. So if you were to address that backlog that we have in the pretrial process, it would also address the number of beds needed for the jail, is what I'm getting at.
Okay, so maybe like efficient case processing.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Streamlined.
Yes.
More pretrial monitoring, less pretrial incarceration.
Okay.
Safer courtroom facilities and the transport of inmates.
How, like, system professionals and staff of jail and pretrial would like they would mirror who they serve, like, you know, like there would be.
So like representation and staffing, is that, okay, I don't want to mischaracterize what's yours. Yes.
No racial inequities.
Okay. Good, ambitious.
Reflection, diversion.
We have diversion, we can add deflection. Yep. Yes.
Keep the mentally ill out of jails.
Yes.
Increased community resources and wraparound services for folks.
Okay.
If we saw that money kind of changing where we were applying.
More support for them.
And restorative accountability as well.
Okay. All right, we're gonna give Chris a second to catch up. She's writing furiously, so 1 second. The last one was?
Restorative accountability.
Thank you. And more wraparound services in the community? Yes, I got that. Oh, you got that one. Yes, go ahead.
Integration, there's some, I don't know how to say it, but successful integration back into the community after you're part of the system.
Re-entry.
But I don't see that up
Re-entry.
there. Seems to be.
Successful, I think that's
Success,
important.
successful
Yeah.
integration after involvement in speaks of.
Yeah, yes.
Maybe, probably the same thing, but just access to programs and services that help that reintegration and reduce recidivism.
Great. Yes, we have a few more. Yeah, go ahead.
Timely data.
Yes. Really appreciate that one. Barbara?
Mentorship.
Mentorship, like that one. Great. Yep.
Continuity of case management and collaboration.
Yes.
Okay, great, you guys. Love these. Yes.
Systems and programs that support holistically, like the whole family.
Whole family.
And then just complete services for people with disabilities.
Great, thank you. Thank you for bringing them into this space. That's really important. Yes.
Ongoing and accountable training for criminal justice professionals.
Okay. Okay, ongoing training. Yes.
Just healing for everyone involved, not only the victims, but the people who are incarcerated, the community, everyone involved. There would be a healing.
Great.
If it was working properly.
A better approach to handling cases for people who have cases in multiple jurisdictions. So municipal, district, superior, if there's a better way to process stuff.
Okay, so maybe some case consolidation.
For
or is
efficient
that
resolution.
An accurate way of. Okay, one more.
A safer community.
Okay, safer. I don't want to, one more. You haven't got to participate yet.
One more. Stronger accountability options for those who are unwilling to change, a repeat offender population that continually enters and exits the system.
Okay, so maybe some more options for what we'd call familiar faces, people who are cycling. Is that accurate? Okay, great. Okay, thank you. This was really productive. Wow, you guys have great ideas, and I didn't sense a lot of disagreement. It seems like we're all fairly aligned on our vision. So as we proceed over the next few months, you're going to have decisions to make and choices. And so I want you to always come back to these, and we'll help to make it a little more manageable and synthesize, but come back to this and have this guide you in your decision making and thinking about which option will help me to get to that community that I envision and that justice system that I envision. So that's why we do this exercise, to really kind of be a guiding light for us as we proceed through this work. I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin. Great.
Good morning again. So my name is Caitlin, and I said a little bit about where I work at Vera. But quickly about my background, I've been at Vera for 7 years, and I've been working in Spokane for the last 4 years. And this might sound pandering, but it's also a true story. When I applied to go to this new position where I was thinking about victimization, I had applied for the job and I accepted, but with one caveat is that I could stay with my Spokane work. And it was a little bit of a battle, but it really meant that much to me. I really do care about this community, I really care about these outcomes. So it's just really a pleasure to be here and gotten to know some of you throughout the years and to continue working with you. So thank you again for having us. I'm going to talk quickly, which is kind of my thing, because we're trying to get through so much, but really if there's something that you didn't understand or something on the screen that I didn't explain, I would really appreciate your questions. I'm going to quickly talk a little bit about Jails 101. And Maggie is going to join me in describing a little bit about what's going on here in Spokane in terms of reform, so we're kind of all on the same page. Most of you probably already know this, but just setting the ground that this conversation is really about the local jail as opposed to prison, the defining features of local jails that are operated facilities, locally operated facilities and hold mostly people who are pretrial, some people sentenced there for misdemeanor crimes of 1 year or less, and then people for other types of holds. And notably, they're rarely long-term facilities. So nationally, the length of stay is 26 days. This is the average length of stay. But locally, you're actually seeing a shorter amount of time, which is 18 days. So let's just remember to keep those figures in mind, that people actually, most people pass through the jail pretty quickly. In jails nationally, every day in this country, there are about 750,000 people in jail, 2/3 of whom are pretrial. But when you look at admissions, the number of people entering the jail door each year, this number is much higher than we might think it is. 17 times the number of people enter jail in America each year as opposed to prison. This is one of the reasons why this is a priority area for the Bureau, because touching jail and interacting with jail is actually a really common experience in American life. And this chart might be a little hard to see. This is national data. This is not local data, and this is historical. But what you're seeing here is these blue bars are the jail incarceration rates across the country from 1980s until 2012, and what you see, a steady decline, right? Incline. Thank you. Gotcha, you're listening. These green and this yellow line below are actually national crime rates. And what we know is starting in the early 1990s, crime started falling dramatically, really almost 50% for both property and violent crimes across America. And yet jail populations continued to creep up. So I point this out to say that local crime and crime generally is certainly a factor in jail population, but it is only one factor. There are many other influences. I'm sorry? Can I speak up? Sure. Thank you. There are many other factors that contribute to who's in a jail and why, and so it's kind of setting the scene for why I'm going to talk about decision points. But policy and practice really matter, right? If bond is set, how long a case takes to flow through the court system, all of these practices and policies also influence the jail population. So as I pointed out, you saw that crime decline starting in 1990, and yet you saw jail populations ballooning. This red line right here, again, this is national data, shows at this time, right, all of a sudden we see this massive increase in people held pretrial. And just to show that that's our theory for that growth in jail, is that we started changing how we do pretrial practices nationally, and it's really where we started seeing an increase in bond. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just wanted to ground us in how we talk about and think about jail populations. A jail population is a combination of how many people enter the jail, admissions, and then how long they stay there. So I said this last night at the town hall, if you were there. If you think of a coffee shop, let's say you walk in, no one's there, you get your coffee, you leave, 10 minutes later, 10 minutes later someone comes in, has the same experience, leave, the fifth person to get there that day might look around and think, no one's been here today, I'm the only person. Well, that's because the length of stay was like pretty short. But if someone came in to the coffee shop, got a cup of coffee, and stayed for 2 hours, and the next person comes in 10 minutes later, stays for 2 hours, what's going to happen? You're going to start seeing a backlog, right? You're going to run out of space. So in order to understand your coffee shop and how it's working and who's been there, you're going to want to look at both who came in the front door and how long they stayed. And in terms of admissions and releases, these are the reasons why in Spokane someone might come into jail. It could be a new arrest or charge, it could be for missing court, someone being sentenced to jail. And then on this column are the reasons why people might be released. They might have paid bond, they might have been released on their own cognizance, their charges might be dismissed. I don't want to go on those in-depthly to save time, but are there any questions on those reasons? Great. So, again, policy and practice matter, and when thinking about admissions and length of stay, there's really 6 key decision points that determine both of these things. And so the takeaway I want you to have and to remember is that no single agency is responsible for the jail population, right? Each of these 6 decision points are influenced by different criminal justice actors. And the good news is that Spokane has a lot going on already that's spanning these decision points. And so I just want to introduce this to remember us to think really broadly across the criminal justice system when we're looking for solutions. And that's Natalie to step in and say a little bit about what's going on.
So you heard Liz mention at the beginning of this morning that we are working with a firm that's going to update jail projections for us. Those projections were last done by a different firm in 2008, and they haven't held up over time. We'll hear from them that projections are really policy. They're influenced by policy less so than science. And so basically I want to walk through some of our policies locally that we have implemented that influence our jail population and our criminal justice system. I'm not going to say all of them, but there are at least one initiative for all of our key decision points. But I actually want to flag some that are new, that they're newer, they're recent, maybe they weren't a part of the conversation the last time there was a group convened to discuss what's going on with our jail and what we want to do with it in the future. So one of those newer initiatives is actually where we are right now, the Spokane Resource Center. And this is an initiative led by the city, Teresa Sanders. We have Kelly Keenan here as well. And it's a partnership with HUD, but it's really financed by the city largely and in donations. But it is an effort to connect people to resources before they hit a crisis. While they're living in poverty or on the edge of poverty, connecting them with wraparound services. If you haven't toured this facility yet, you really should. There are 25-ish providers co-located in this building. So people who are already under immense stress and living with immense burdens can come to one place to get help with housing, work, what else? Medical care, food, all of that stuff. So it's really exciting. It's something that I consider to be a front-end intervention and a back-end intervention because folks coming out of the criminal justice system can also access this facility and help stabilize. So thank you to the city for welcoming us here today and also all you did to get this off the ground. We also have others at the table that have led different initiatives. Our city police department and our sheriff's office have created and implemented co-deploy teams. A lot of you know about this already, but Frontier Behavioral Health is working with our law enforcement agencies to create these mental health clinicians that ride around with law enforcement and help de-escalate issues on the street and divert them away from our emergency rooms, which we know are expensive, and from our jail, which we know is also expensive and oftentimes ineffective in addressing mental health issues. So the Spokane Police Department has been operating this since July, and they have about a 79% diversion rate, which is pretty incredible. Only 16% of those individuals are taken to the hospital, and only about, I think, 8% or so are taken to the jail. So it's incredibly effective. The Sheriff's Office is also tracking diversion rates. It's been off the ground a little bit for just a handful of months at this point. They've had about 250 contacts, and again, only a handful of those people are actually going to jail. The Sheriff's Office also tracks time saved, so how many minutes are saved by having this co-deployed team respond to a mental health crisis rather than a patrol officer, and thus far it's over 10,000 minutes. So that translates into better services faster, and it translates into better uses of our investments in our law enforcement agencies. So a big recognition and thank you to you all for all you have done to make that possible. Frontier Behavioral Health has also given us some rough estimates of what they think we're saving with these initiatives. And basically, they estimate that if we we're going to arrest all those people we diverted, but instead diverted them, we saved up to $5 million, just over a handful of months. And even if we were only going to arrest 10% of those we actually came into contact with and diverted, we still came away with at least a $200,000 savings. So this is a really exciting and effective program. Another exciting program that is well underway is our mental health crisis stabilization facility. This is going to be a facility where law enforcement can take individuals at their discretion who are struggling with substance use disorders or who are having a mental health crisis. So traditionally, they've only been able to take them to jail, but now we're developing a new facility where they can take individuals to go through medical clearance, sobering and detox if needed, and then mental health crisis stabilization beds. That's going to be a 16-bed facility for our crisis beds, capped at that level for Medicaid reimbursement reasons. So we'll have some sustainable funding there with Medicaid reimbursement. We've also received over $4 million in capital funding from the state. So there's a lot of you around this table who are very invested and involved in that program. Thank you for everything that you're doing. We're really excited to have it up and running late in 2020, I believe. Another newer initiative is UpTrust, which is run by our county public defender's office, and that's a text messaging court date reminder system. Municipal court uses another system. District court also has a court system, but this is really exciting because the research shows that just sending a reminder actually boosts court appearances by 30 to 50%. So this is newer, it was launched in August, and for individuals who are getting those text messages, we're seeing very low rates of failing to appear for court. So this is honestly just a sampling of all the work that everyone around this table has been a part of for many years, and we're continuing to think through new and creative solutions. But there are additional opportunities for us to pursue and to, again, create policy that's going to impact this population.
Thanks, Maggie. Are there any follow-up questions on what Maggie just described about what's going on here?
Second question, is there anybody from the sheriff's office in the room?
Oh, there was a question. Okay. Yes or no question. Got it. Okay, easy. Yeah.
I do have one quick question. This obviously is a very positive trend, but I've been involved in this type of work for less than a year. I heard something about this has been going on for 10 years. If I'm a cynic who's been involved in this work for 10 years, what about this that tells me this is different from what we've talked about in the past?
What makes this process different?
Right, because there are people that are going to say, yeah, we've had this conversation before, and we're still talking about the same subject we were talking about 10 years ago. So what makes this different from before? Again, I've been involved in this for less than a year, so I'm still trying to catch up, so forgive me for that question.
I see a second in the back.
I agree.
So yeah, this is a shared feeling and sentiment, I think, in this group and beyond into the community. I mean, others who have been involved in this work can speak to the differences in this process, but I'll highlight just a few. One is the fact that I talked about blind spots earlier. We are making an effort to eliminate as many blind spots as we can by convening a group that has an incredibly diverse array of professional experience and expertise. We have social service providers here, we have our law enforcement entities in jail, we have our courts, we have elected officials, we have community members. So this is a really collective and exciting group that I think is, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if we've had a group that's this diverse in terms of trying to think through our criminal justice system that's been this engaged before. I also think that we have done this work for 10 years, building up momentum and also building up levels of engagement. And so I think it's really powerful to see this group of people. Teresa was like, can you take a picture? Because this is amazing that we have law enforcement here taking time away from the streets, from the office. We have our elected officials here who are making this a priority. And this was not something that we could turn on 10 years ago. This is something that we have built up. And so that is a little bit different as well. I think that the consultants that we have are doing an incredible job of drilling into our data, which we haven't been able to access this quickly and at this level of detail in the past. So that's going to make a huge difference, both in terms of the projections, but also in terms of really understanding who we're holding in the jail, what those populations look like, and what are the best practices for addressing and managing those individuals and groups.
I just say in the last 10 years, too, there's been a tremendous change in the police department. I don't know much about the sheriff's department, probably that, too. In terms of support of the community court, crisis intervention training, very much accepting of the mentally ill ride-along, or somebody from Frontier. I just think that there's been an increase in the trust and faith by the community in the police department. This is odd coming from a public defender, but I really think that without their support, we wouldn't have gotten to where we are today.
Sneezing on the truth in the back.
All right, I need to move on. I'm so sorry. Moderator privilege. I have 7 minutes for this section.
If you have questions,
write
them down.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. So really quickly, I want to ground us in thinking about who is most impacted by jail, and I think that this helps us start to get towards thinking through solutions a little bit. It is no secret, and everyone in this room knows that it's most marginalized populations who are experience jail at disproportionately high rates. We know it's people of color. This top bullet point is statistics locally, this is local numbers. So here in Spokane, African American people are in jail 7 times the rate as white people, and Native Americans 4 times the rate. We know that people in the jail bear much higher rates of poverty. I appreciate the woman who brought up disability. 40% nationally of people in jail have a disability. I think that this is a really invisible population in jail that we don't think about.
Just a quick question, can you define that? How's disability defined in that statistic?
So it's a self-reported statistic, that's a survey. It does include things like being deaf, blindness, I think severe psychiatric disabilities and mental illness are actually taken out. So these are things like physical limitations, being hard of hearing. Again, this is jails are not designed for people with disabilities, and people with disabilities in jail have really high rates of things like victimization and sexual abuse, like a really vulnerable population in jail. A group we don't talk about a lot are LGBT people in jail, and this might seem a little out of the box, but LGBT people are actually vastly overrepresented in jail, especially gay and lesbian women. And I bring this up because I want us to think expansively about who our partners can be in this work.
I'm sorry, these are national statistics?
Yeah, these are national statistics. The only local one is the top one. I don't have local figures, but it's certainly something for us to explore. Of course, people with behavioral health issues with mental illness and substance abuse. This is no surprise to people here. And then the last one is victims of crime. I know we're often think in a binary that victims are in the community and people who cause harm are inside confinement facilities. There's a lot more complicated than that. And so many people embody both these histories. A survey of women in jail found that 86% had survived sexual violence and 77% had survived intimate partner violence. We don't have statistics on men, so we have to look into studies around prison, but a recent study of returning citizens in Boston found that a whole quarter of people returning home from prison had been shot or stabbed in their lifetime. We're talking about high levels of trauma, a lot of needs, and remember that all of these identities intersect, right? So these are not separate populations. Obviously, a person can have multiple identities. So we're talking about a lot of needs in a space that's really hard to meet people's needs, right? Jail is a really difficult place to do that. And I think when I brought up some of the complexities of folks who are most impacted by jail, the first instinct is to think about, okay, well, we just need like a lot of programs and that will help solve this issue. Programs in jails do have some limitations, and I just want us to be mindful of that. I understand that there are many different reasons, several different reasons, why we sentence someone and why we use incarceration. Some is to keep people confined who are dangerous and out of the community, right? Sometimes we say it's for rehabilitation purposes, and I just want us to question that a little bit. So for the folks that we think can and should be rehabilitated, I want us to start thinking outside the jail box a little bit, because there are some limitations. One is this average length of stay being 18 days. It's a pretty narrow window to deliver real and meaningful services. Secondly, jail is not a therapeutic setting, kind of no matter how you build it, right? People are in duress, they're distressed, they're disconnected from their kids, and we know that when people are in a traumatic space, it can be hard for them to authentically engage in treatment. Third, even a short stay in jail obviously disrupts what's going well in someone's life. So it might be great that you have an employment program in your jail, but if that person by being there even for 4 days has lost their job, their financial burdens have gone to their family, this job program might actually be basically counterproductive. We know that, I know I'm going through these fast, we also know that pretrial detention leads to worse criminal justice outcomes. So we have a lot of studies now that show that people who were detained pretrial just for a couple days, compared to people that were out instantaneously, had a lot worse outcomes. This means more likely to commit a crime 2 years after sentence. This means harsher sentences, more likely to be sentenced to jail. We also see that starting to perpetuate itself.
Can I ask you, I think you really need to modify that statement,
Sure.
because, so that's a pretty broad assumption that pretrial results in negative outcomes for everybody. I mean, that's what that says.
Pretrial detention.
Yeah.
That's what the research shows. So there have been studies comparing people who they've controlled for everything and found that really what the difference was whether the person was in or out of pretrial detention.
So I guess I think to things in our community where we very frequently see when we have repeat offenders, even if they're only detained for a short period of time, we have dozens fewer vehicles stolen in our community. So that, it's like, we have to balance the impact to the community as well as the potential impact to the individual.
And I think that part of our challenge is addressing those immediate needs. What are we doing with property crime? What are we doing with other violent crime? In the short term, while we're also building out long-term solutions to try and make our pretrial response more effective in the short term and in the long term. So I appreciate you raising that. I think we're in a really tough position because our community deserves quick fixes. We feel pressured in our professional positions and in our positions in the community to provide those. And I think we're gonna have to sort of continue developing what initiatives we have on the table, identifying other things we can immediately do, and then what in the long term can we build out that is a more effective system for everyone.
Yeah, and I want to ground this in so many of these too are treatment oriented about long-term rehabilitation, family unification, and my point is that we need to think beyond the jail if we want to achieve all of this, right? And I'm just hoping that as a task force, we can think beyond a physical building into a broader community-wide effort.
Or before even.
Or before, yeah, and then, broader than the facility itself, right? Because this is really hard to achieve in the building, especially with folks with that many distinct needs.
I do see a lot of hands up. I just wanted to ask super quickly a clarification. When you're talking about worse criminal justice and safety outcomes, we're not just talking about the impact to the individual who's incarcerated. I mean, I've read plenty of studies that say recidivism is actually higher in individuals who've had to stay in jail pre-trial, and then they get out, and then they commit another crime. People who get out on their own recognizance or are bailed out have lower recidivism rates. So we're talking community safety as well, right?
Yeah, and I mean, Teresa, I do agree with you. I think that the way this phrase is like too much of a blanket, right? It's not saying that all pretrial detention is unacceptable or inherently
Well,
bad.
and if I can say, and the only reason that I think, and I appreciate the point, there's a lot of data around this, and I think the reason that I bring it up is as soon as we create a perception that we should never hold anybody for trial, then you start building camps and points of view. To Commissioner French's comment, we can start sort of rallying around our position rather than the outcome that
I hear that. That's certainly not our stance.
I have a question about the study of the pretrial detention leading to more recidivism.
Yeah.
What analysis is there of the individuals that are detained pretrial as far as their criminal history versus, say, someone that comes in as detained pretrial with little criminal history?
That's a great question. So for this study, they matched up people who were very similar, have similar risk levels and criminal histories. You could kind of compare. You know,
so was it because you're talking about people that were, because under our court rule, the more history you have, that's going to increase the chances under the rule you're detained pretrial.
Right.
So is it because you're dealing with an offender who is in a chronic cycle of offending, or is it because they're held pretrial? I'm just wondering how the study differentiated that.
So they looked at people with very similar criminal histories, and some people who stayed in for a couple of days, some people were out. It's probably the people made bond. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, so I mean, there's research we can share, but the way the research is done is saying, okay, all else equal, there's research to show that for people who are held pre-trial, it has what they call a criminogenic effect, which might, you might think that someone loses their job or they lose their family, community connections, like that might, lead someone down a different path than if they were sort of out in the community and able to fight their case.
But if that's more criminal history, aren't they more likely to be detained pre-trial?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but the way the research was done was trying to, what Caitlin was saying, match people who had, similar criminal backgrounds, similar ages, whatever they match, similar race. That's how the research is done, is saying all else equal, we can, I heard you say correlation does not equal causation, but we noticed that this group had, worse recidivism outcomes than the group that was out there. But it's certainly, if research is out there, we can share it.
Okay, so in the interest of time,
we'll come back to you after the break.
Maybe on a different topic.
No, say it. It's okay.
I'm deferring to the moderator.
Yeah, I want to hear from you.
So I think there's a public perception that we have to be aware of too, because I think building on what Teresa's statement is if we get to a point where we think pretrial detention is all bad, the public perception is if somebody is released and commits a crime or has a serious interaction with law enforcement within 24, 48, 72 hours, the public perception is they were released prematurely. And so as you're moving forward on public policy, there's this thing about public perception, whether based in fact or not, there's a huge wave to work against. And so that's why I say they're not going to think that what caused the interaction was because they were released and shouldn't have been ever in pretrial detention, as opposed to they were released when they shouldn't have been. And I think that's the concern that we're going to hear, or we should anticipate hearing from a lot of the general public as this discussion gets out there.
Yeah, I really hear you, and I think my point here is, again, there are different philosophies and purposes of incarceration. One is certainly incapacitation, and I'm not questioning that, and there is a role and there's a place for that, right? And even at the pretrial level. I think what I'm trying to set the scene for is, again, these very large, ambitious goals, which I heard a lot about rehabilitation, well-being. My point is to think beyond the jail as a way of achieving this. Is not saying that there's not a place for that.
So, and I have to say something. So, being a formerly incarcerated person myself, I know that there was a stage in my life where I needed a timeout, and that this kind of facility or this kind of setting can actually provide that, and there's a place for that. But there's also that place to where it becomes counterproductive. And I think that's what we're trying to kind of suss out, is where does that actually kind of fit in here? Because that is absolutely a thing that is real and happens in our criminal justice system, in our jails today, is that we have slanted towards a side to where there's a huge potential for counterproductivity instead of the rehabilitative public safety that we're all really looking for, and that we all think, that we all deserve, and that our public does.
Right. I mean, pretrial services is very different than pretrial detention.
Yeah.
The layman will not make that distinction.
Yeah.
It's insider dialogue to this group.
Yep.
When the minute you say pretrial, that's all they hear.
Yeah.
They don't differentiate between detention and services.
Yeah, when we were at the town hall yesterday, there was a woman who was like, what is pretrial services? And like, are they probation? Like, Maggie was really breaking it down, and that's part of our broader community engagement efforts that we really want to do. This is complicated, it is nuanced. This is not, the general public doesn't know what pretrial is. So we really want to help educate people too, so there is a more informed public. So people don't get the misunderstanding of what we're trying to accomplish.
And I think that through this process, it's important to flag, hey, this is going to be an issue with our community, that it either is real or not, but we need to be mindful of it and address it and think through it. So I appreciate you raising that, and please, I think everyone around the table continue to raise those things that maybe we're not thinking about. And as Caitlin starts to get into our jail population, she just was flagging the national sort of trends and statistics for us to keep in mind. And as we continue through this process, we'll be drilling down farther and farther into our own data to understand who are those people we need to be holding pre-trial? Who are the ones that, as Caitlin said, need to be incapacitated to stop the car theft? And then who are the people who really are not well served in the jail, and who our community is not well served by keeping them in the jail? So this is a process that it's an exploratory process for all of us, but we wanted to set the stage with some national trends as we move on to our local data.
Turning it over to Alex.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Golden. I've been at HERA for just over a year now, and I'm a quantitative researcher, so I'm really excited to be here to start the process of digging into local trends and local data so we can get a sense of what's going on right here compared to the national level, and see, get a sense of who's in the jail in Spokane and what populations are taking up. So to start off, I'm just going to give a brief introduction to how we look at jail data, what types of figures we use to understand the jail population. So as Caitlin mentioned earlier, there are a few key things we look at when we're trying to understand a jail population. First, admissions. So that shows us the scope of who is being touched by the jail, even if it's for a short period of time. And looking at admissions can help us identify opportunities for potential alternatives to jail incarceration. We also look at length of stay, which is, as you could guess, how long an individual stays in jail. And that's impacted by a lot of different factors, some of which are here. And the combination of admissions and length of stay is what determines the size of the jail population. We also look at an average daily population to get a sense of who is incarcerated on an average day. So average daily population, or ADP, is largely composed of people with longer lengths of stay because the people who stay longer are members of the jail population for a longer time. So they're making up the length of stay, or the ADP, sorry. So these are the 3 data sources that I'm gonna show you information from in these slides. And so we use different data sources and structures in order to answer different questions about the jail population. So I'm going to give you a short description of each of these just to highlight the different types of data we use and what different questions they can answer. So first, I'm going to show you some data, historical data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics. And these will be annual average daily population numbers from 1970 to 2015. And that's showing the number of people in jail in a single day on average. And next we're going to look at monthly aggregated data reports that were provided by the Spokane County Jail System as part of the Safety and Justice Challenge work. And I'm going to pull the most recent month of data we have, which is January of 19. And that'll include both monthly average populations and snapshot numbers from the last day of the month. And because snapshots and average daily population capture daily population, as I explained, and not admissions, these are going to be largely made up of people with longer stays in jail. And then finally, I pulled some numbers from a preliminary analysis done by JFA, the consultants that are going to be working on the jail projection analysis. And this is administrative data for everyone who passed through the county jails in a year-long period. And here specifically, I'm going to look at numbers from a release cohort, so everyone who was released from jail in this year-long period. And because this is a release cohort, we're able to capture those people who have very short stays in jail in a way that looking at the average daily population doesn't capture. So to start off with the historical jail population, in 2015, Spokane County Jails had an average daily population of 834 people. And relative to the 2015 population size, this is a rate of 259 people who are incarcerated in jail per 100,000 county residents age 15 to 64. So looking at rate gives us an understanding of the jail population in the context of any changes in the overall county population.
And so when we're talking about county, we're talking about the one downtown and Geiger.
Yes,
right?
total jail incarceration.
Does that include juvenile population?
Does the jail incarceration? Yeah, so this is total jail incarceration.
I guess the reason I ask the question is you say that it's, the population is 15 to whatever that, we don't put 15-year-olds in our jail, so why would you include them in the population?
Yeah, so this is from national statistics, so they use the 15 to 64 population because that's the most common age range for people in jail nationally. So rather than doing a analysis of the jail incarceration rate relative to the entire county population, we're trying to pull at least a population subset that's a little bit more reflective of the jail population. So here, when we look at this period from 1970 to 2015, we do see that jail incarceration in Spokane County has increased, and it's increased by 64%. But when we look at this trend over time, we can see that this increase really hasn't been consistent over this period. There's actually been many periods of declining jail population throughout this time period. So growth is not necessarily inevitable. We even see that the incarceration rate dropped 46% from 2005 to 2011. And when here we can just add in the overall U.S. population in the lighter gray, and the Washington State population is that darker gray line. And so you can see in context that Spokane County incarceration rate is lower than the national average, but higher than the Washington State average. I wanted to pause here in case folks have any questions. Yeah.
Do you have what the population increased in that time frame?
So these are.
I guess you go per 100,000, right? So
yes.
That should keep up with population.
Exactly, yeah. So this is relative to the population size. Other other question? Great. So now I'm going to move into that January 2019 average population. So the average daily population for the month of January 2019 was 919 people, and this is including 150 people who were held on contract. And the average length of stay was 16 days.
And just for clarity, the 100 contract is that U.S. Marshal holds?
Yeah, majority U.S.
It includes U.S. Marshal holds, DOC, and then some transport contracts as well. So for folks who might not be as familiar, it's they're not our local population of individuals who are having charges pressed through our city or county systems, but they are moving through the federal system or the state system, or they're being transported through our jurisdiction onto another jurisdiction.
And the majority of those 150 are U.S. Marshal holds.
When we count our jail stay as 18 days, that includes the holds too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is this number embedded in the totals in the previous slide?
The previous costs included in the
Yeah, so the previous slide includes all people who are physically held in the jails throughout that period. So that doesn't break down by contract and non-contract.
But that 150 isn't consistent, right? So that 150 hasn't been the marker up until 2018, 2019?
Yeah, so those contract beds have increased in recent years.
And there, you keep asking questions, but just to let you know, we're just at the very preliminary stages of collecting and analyzing our data. And so we'll continue to, again, drill down, get more specific information, but we wanted to share with you what we do have access to so far. But it is just the very first step.
This also, I'm sorry, this includes all the catch and releases, right?
Yeah, so this is an average population for the month of January.
Catch and release are just brought in, booked, and spun back out the door. They aren't given a meal, they're not given a bed, they're not given a shelter, there's nothing. This really affects the length of stay, because you have a large number of people who are considered to have 1 day in jail, who really have 2 hours in jail.
Yeah, and as we go deeper into the data, I kind of break this down by different release reasons, and so we can see kind of a sense of length of stay and other factors broken down in a more detailed manner. But that's definitely something we'd like to look at when we get deeper into the data.
That 16 days, is that considered pretrial? Is that what that is, or?
That's made up of anyone who's in the jail, so it could be pretrial or post-sentence population.
I struggle
And
with that
again,
one. I'll tell you why later as you want to hear, but I struggle with that number.
Sure. Yeah, and again, I'll show some more breakdowns as we go, but there's a lot of nuance to what is making up these numbers. Definitely.
I was just gonna say, we have struggled with those that are on holds and those that are just, they're our regular population. So maybe if you guys could break those down separately, link the stay for those folks, link the stay for the local population. And then I think it's, no, I'm just throwing it out there as helpful. And then add in the in and outs, because those do have a bearing on how long the overall stay is. And then lastly, on the federal comment, some of the U.S. Marshal holds are local charges being prosecuted at the federal level. So it's just important to get those little nuances out there.
So Caitlin's already picking up on what I was going to suggest. So as we go, I want to let Alex continue showing us what data we do have, but again, Vera is going to continue collecting this along with JFA, and so we can, I'm going to suggest to Vera that we capture everything that we're going to pull and circulate that to the group to identify any gaps in the data that we are going to access and analyze. So if we're not looking at something that someone thinks is important, you can respond to us in that way.
So we actually have time in the agenda later today for these data questions to keep building out that list.
So you got your note cards? Do we need more note cards? Pass more around. Write down your data questions.
Yeah, this is the parking lot, you got it. Data queue parking lot.
Great. So again, this is broken down, and here we see that the majority of the jail population was pretrial, 73% of the total jail population on January 31st, 2019. But again, 16% of the jail population is held on contract. This is 150 people of the jail population as well.
Yeah, it's just, a point of clarity, I understand, I don't want to beat the horse to death, but on the contracted beds, particularly for the U.S. Marshals, and as Judge Hill talked alluded to, some of the DOC, this is local crime being prosecuted at the federal level. So I think we need to keep that in perspective when we're looking at the overall contracted beds. So.
But I think that when we look at the data, it's important to know what are the things that we can control. Because like as a public defender, I cannot control a DOC.
Yeah, I think that's true.
You can't control the marshal hold from length of stay. And I think we should look at the terms of length of stay of put in and then also take out, both numbers of your book and release. Because again, I can't control your book and release, but we need to know how many is that.
Okay, I'm gonna move forward, and again, there will be more time for data discussion, and this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we're gonna look at in terms of data analysis moving forward. So here we can actually look at the jail population broken down by what communities are most overrepresented, and we see that the Native population, African American population, and the Latinx population are overrepresented in jail as compared to their share of the county population. We can look at this also in terms of incarceration rates, and again, we see higher incarceration rates for the Native population, the Black population, and the Latinx population. And so, as Caitlin mentioned before, there's a number of different factors that contribute to justice system involvement and what might be making up the jail population. So this is just going to get a sense of who is in jail and start thinking about how we can think about the jail population.
And this is specifically to Spokane?
Yes, this is all specific to Spokane. Looking at length of stay, we see that African American people and Latinx people have longer lengths of stay, and this is certainly a contributing factor to who's making up the jail population. People who stay longer are making up the jail population for a longer period of time.
Could I ask a question on that, or shall I wait until later?
Anything we can hold. Yeah, I only have a few
We wanna
minutes
give
to
you
get
guys
through
a
the
break.
rest of
Yeah,
them.
we're really trying to get you a break. So you can go to the bathroom, have some coffee.
And I want to be able to show you all of the data that we do have. So, but thank you. I really appreciate all the questions. Okay. And so for the last few slides, I'm going to be looking at this 2017 release cohort. So this is all the people who were released from jail at any time in 2017. And that's a total of over 19,000 people are included in these data. So here we're breaking down by release reason. So this plot is giving you the number of people released for each different reason, and then next to that, the average length of stay for each of those groups. So pulling out some particularly interesting, can we hold questions?
Can we get a copy of these slides afterwards?
Yes, we'll circulate them afterwards,
Okay,
and we'll make
thank
sure
you.
that in future meetings that it is more readable from the back.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry.
Sorry, read my mind.
Sorry about that. Yeah, putting a lot onto a single slide, particularly this graph. I know it's hard to read, but so here pulling out in red, you can see that there's a lot of people who are released on recognizance after less than 2 days. So there's a lot of people cycling through the jail, not staying for a very long amount of time.
Is that broken down by, is that disaggregated by race?
It can be, it's not in this presentation. And then also there's a lot of people who eventually have their cases dismissed, but who are spending over a month in jail on average. And so this bar is shorter, but actually when we look at these two groups in terms of bed days, which is trying to get a sense of the kind of total amount of time all of these people are spending in jail, these two groups actually take up a similar amount of space in the jails. So the 478 people with their cases dismissed made up a total of 17,000 bed days, and those people who were OR made up about 13,000.
Does dismissal include felony reductions and SOCs and programming that led to dismissal because the sentence was worked off versus just there was no further work on the case whatsoever? Is that distinction made?
I'm not sure in this data what all is included in dismissal. So this is preliminary analysis that was done by our partners, so I have only the aggregate numbers, but that's definitely something we can look into when we have the full data set to look at.
Right, like especially SOCs and those things.
Yes, they let it go. That's important.
So I
Or there's a
actually-
global resolution and everything's put into one case, so one file is dismissed, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't worked through till the end of sentencing.
It might be helpful to have a glossary with these terms, but just like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know what release to law enforcement actually means, so maybe just include a slide that describes.
So we'll do, when we circulate the slideshow, I'll hold off and wait to get some additional definitions, and attach those to the circulation. And, as Alex is saying, our partner organization pulled some of this together, so it might take some time to get those, but, we'll get that to you as soon as we can.
Maggie, I would have an ask on that. I would ask that you at least give us these preliminary slides and then do another release.
Got it, slides first, definitions later.
Okay, and yeah, then lastly, I just wanted to highlight here that additionally, we're seeing people spend 11 days in jail on average before bonding out. So even people who are eventually able to post bond spend over a week in jail on average when it comes to that. And here is a breakdown by type of charge. So we see that almost half of the people who came through the jail were charged with misdemeanors, but 32% were charged with felonies. The rest were pulled for various other agencies. And breaking down length of stay by charge as well. Again, the average length of stay was 18.5 days, but this varied a lot by charge category. People charged with felonies and held for the U.S. Marshals who had the longest average length of stay in jail. And that's all from me on data.
Great, so we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Thank you.